大家好，欢迎收看《旁观华尔街视角》。但是今天的话题跟华尔街和经济关系都不是特别直接，而是我最近专访了前杜克大学商学院院长，现在在普华永道做国际领袖与领导策略师的 Blair Sheppard 教授。他最近出了一本新书，他的新书的主题是人类有10年的时间要立即解决4大危机。如果这4大危机不紧急解决的话，我们会面临相当大的灾难。这个对话时间比较长，我会分为2次陆续播出。那么也希望观众呢能够认真的听讲，主要它的内容是对我们都会有很多启发。时间关系，现在我们马上就请 Sheppard 教授为我们首先介绍一下这4大危机都是什么。
The one crisis is crisis of prosperity. Essentially, people feeling like the future is worse than today, and therefore not innovating, not dreaming, not trying, not caring, and in different places, different locations. So in some places, retirees tiring broke, kids graduating with no jobs, or people losing jobs because of technology. Second crisis is the impact that technology is having we didn't mean it to have. So industrial revolution causing climate. Massive platforms causing harms on society. So an example is that the fastest growing cause of death among 16-year-old males is suicide. Girls are self-harming. No one who built social media meant that to occur. It's an unintended consequence, but it's big and they're getting worse, right? The third one is that society actually is polarizing, and therefore it's very hard to lead today. Think about leading a multilateral institution in the world we live in today, right? And the final one is that people are increasingly distrustful of institutions. Now that one's really important. So think about a fish in water. Institutions are our legal system, our police force, our political system, our tax system, our education system. They make life work. If we don't trust them, then life gets really, really hard.
I think this 4 crises become more being emphasized after the COVID-19.
Yes.
Shouldn't we now focus on finding better ways of protecting ourselves rather than just go back to visit the old system and being damaged? Or you think we should build upon the old system we have and to make it better? How can we do this?
Yeah, so your first point is that it's exactly right that COVID made all of those worse. It just made them worse, and then added its own additional problems, right? So I think what you have to do is go back and realize that the reason we have the crises is 70 years of success, right? So and we were successful. So we resolved the Second World War and all the damage there. We brought 2 billion people out of poverty. We brought China into the global economy and India into the global economy. And so the ideas that worked for 70 years were great. They just were too simple and they have a dark side. So we thought that globalization is only good. We thought that technology is only good. And we thought that simple measures like GDP and shareholder value are the right way to measure. In the world we lived in, they were good ways to think. The problem is they're showing their dark side, right? So let me go back to 2 crises to illustrate the point. Globalization grew massive wealth, but what happened is different parts of every region in the world were really successful and others not. So think about Western China versus the coast. Think about Northern England versus London. Think about Southern Europe versus Northern Europe. So globalization created disparity among regions and among people, right? And actually among generations. So the coming up generation have a much worse life confronting them than we did, right? And the reason for that is that globalization, if we'd measured more complex measured and looked at how is the whole country doing, the dispersion in the country, or how is social welfare doing, then that wouldn't have happened. But because we had a simple measure of success, which is just overall economic success of a country, GDP, we missed the unintended consequences of globalization. So we have to take our ideas and make them a little more complicated. Therefore, say, globalization only works if you have thriving local economies first. Technology is only good if we understand the unintended human consequences of technology and we mitigate them. And simple measures like shareholder value and GDP are only good if we think about a broader set of measures as well that are more inclusive. And so we have to essentially add complexity to the original idea. You can't throw globalization away, but it makes no sense. Let me give you that example in particular. Think about one of the things that happens at globalization is winner takes all in a technology-based world, right? The big ones win. So think of it as the Olympics, for example. If there are only 2 or 3 swimmers in a swim race, or gymnasts in gymnastics, or track runners, it wouldn't be very interesting. We need good, thriving local athletic communities that then build to the state level and provincial level and national level and then eventually global. Same thing in economics. We need thriving communities everywhere in the world. Then we can globalize. But don't globalize and kill the communities in the process. That's what we did. We didn't mean to, but we did.
Mm-hmm. But the globalization happened. It's not somebody organized.
We kind of did. We kind of did, right? So there was this agreement that we'd create the World Trade Organization, and then most schools taught globalization, including my own, by the way. I was at Duke University for 33 years, dean of a business school. I taught globalization. We actually created a program designed to help people globalize. So we kind of did, right? And so we can, if we can think our way into it, we can think our way out of it too. And I don't mean to kill globalization. I think we have to be more subtle. But yeah, it didn't just happen. It was an intentional act by humanity to globalize. It really was. And so we can have an intentional act by humanity to fix the issues as well.
You're saying the localization is more important right now before the globalization. The local economy has to be flourished. But how can you guarantee every region in the world have the same kind of flourished prosperity in their local region?
But to your point, it's subtler than that. It is clearly the case that some places will be more successful than others. The problem is we shouldn't actually allow things to fall behind because we neglect them, right? So if you think about gross domestic product, it looks at how well a country is doing overall. If that's the only measure we have, we're not focusing on how broadly successful are we being, right? But I think in part, the real answer to the question about how do you create thriving communities is you get citizens in the world to say, I'm going to take care of a place I love. So we actually have a story in the book about a woman from Kunshan, right, China, who loved Kunshan. And as the vice mayor, she would do whatever was required to make it a successful city. It could have been left behind, right? I mean, it could have been one of many third-tier cities in China that was not successful, but she wouldn't let it happen. We just need more local heroes like that, right, who pick up and say, I'm going to help the town I care about, I love, actually.
My own observation by reading news information is because the globalization happened because the corporation want cheap labors.
Yeah.
They were not thinking about the human betterment together.
In a sense, it's back to the point, right? Which is if the only measure of success for a company is shareholder value, then I'm by definition going to go find the cheapest labor I can. And I'm not going to care about the impact I have on the environment, and I'm not going to care about what towns I leave behind. I'm just not going to worry because my only job is to help people succeed who own the company. It turns out that shareholder value was doctrine in business schools all over the world. Right? What we have to do is change the doctrine and actually get investors to say, I only want to invest in something that I know will be sustainably successful. Now, when we start imposing that as a constraint, sustainably successful, I care about the people I'm employing. I care about my customers. I care about the towns I'm leaving behind. And we're actually seeing that shift in investor communities. They're starting to say, it's not enough for you to give me 14% returns. You also have to make the world better at the same time. So I think we're going to have serious conversations among existing investors. We're going to have to educate the people that are in business right now. We're going to have to fix our institutions. I mean, if it took the whole world to get us here in 70 years, it's going to take the whole world to undo it. And unfortunately, we only have 10 years, by the way, right? So we're going to have to have some leaders who do things massively and quickly. Actually, I think we will. COVID actually showed us we could, by the way, right? We all learned we could do things faster than we thought we could. We could go. You and I probably would have had this interview live in New York, right? Or I would have flown to Hong Kong, and it turns out we're doing it on the computer. So we learned to do that overnight. We can do some other things overnight too.
因为时间关系，网上节目时间不能太长，现在实际上已经是蛮长了，所以我们接下来的2个问题，一个就是国际的领袖人物问题，以及如何在维护自我的繁荣、自我的利益不受伤害情况下，欢迎广大的移民加盟，而建立更完美的社会制度。好，谢谢你的收看，我们下次再见。